I woke up to footsteps inside a house where, as far as I knew, there were only 3 of us. The steps didn't come closer or move away. They lingered, like someone was checking who might already be awake. And when I later realized the front door had been unlocked, both locks undone, it became clear this wasn't a dream or a mistake. That winter, right around the Christmas holidays, my 2 best friends, Ethan and Lucas, and I decided to do something different. Instead of family dinners, forced small talk, and long drives, we rented a small cabin outside the city just to disconnect. We were all in our early 20s, overworked, living far from our families, and completely burned out. A few days of doing absolutely nothing sounded perfect. The cabin was about an hour away, sitting right at the edge of the woods. Technically, it was part of a small neighborhood, but that didn't mean much. The other cabins were scattered far apart, barely visible through the trees. We arrived in the evening after dark. We'd brought bags of food, snacks, alcohol, and Ethan even dragged along a gaming console. The night started off relaxed. We drank, played games, and stayed up late in the living room. It wasn't a picture-perfect Christmas, but it was fun, and that was all we wanted. When we finally went to bed, I fell asleep almost instantly. The cabin was freezing and the floors and walls creaked like any old wooden place, but I was too exhausted to care, at least until I woke up. Outside was still completely dark. I didn't check the time, but it felt like I'd been asleep for a few hours. What woke me was a sound, faint, slow footsteps coming from the living room. They weren't normal steps. They were careful, deliberate, like someone trying not to make noise. Half asleep, I assumed it had to be one of the guys getting water or using the bathroom. I stayed still, listening, waiting for the sound to move down the hallway. It didn't. The creaking stayed in the same spot, right near the front door, back and forth, almost pacing. I thought about calling out, but yelling from a dark room didn't feel right. Going out there didn't either. I didn't want to scare anyone for no reason. After a while, the footsteps stopped, and the cabin went silent again. I convinced myself it was nothing and fell back asleep. Morning light filled the living room when I finally got up. Ethan and Lucas were already awake. I joked about who had been creeping around in the middle of the night, expecting a dumb excuse. Instead, they both looked confused. Ethan said he passed out right away. Lucas said he never got up once. I laughed it off, figuring maybe I'd dreamed it. Then I looked at the front door. Both locks were unlocked. The deadbolt and the handle. The door was still shut, but clearly not secured. I asked if either of them had gone outside earlier. Both said no. When I pointed at the door, the mood shifted instantly. We were all pretty sure we'd locked it before going to bed. After a moment, Lucas tried to rationalize it. Old door, bad latch, maybe the wind. The kind of excuses people make when they don't want to think too hard about something unsettling. Eventually, we let it go. The day itself was normal. We ate breakfast in our jackets because the cabin barely warmed up, played games, watched movies, exchanged small joke gifts, and video called our families. Snow was coming down hard, and it was way too cold to spend any time outside, even though we'd originally planned to explore the area. By evening, the whole unlocked door thing felt like a strange but distant memory. Still, as it got darker, a bad feeling crept in. We were loud, laughing in the living room, but I kept catching myself staring at the windows. The woods were too close. During the day, I'd noticed trees just a few feet from the glass, but now there was nothing but solid black. It felt like someone could be standing right there, watching us, completely unseen. I didn't say anything. I didn't want to ruin the mood without proof. That night, we went to bed earlier. Ethan turned in first. Lucas and I talked for a bit longer before heading to our rooms. I lay awake for a long time. There were no curtains, and the window beside my bed made the room feel exposed. Then I heard it again. Footsteps. This time, I knew it wasn't the house. The sound was steady, controlled, unmistakably human. I sat up and listened. No one had left their room. I would have heard it. The footsteps moved slowly through the living room, like someone studying the space. I got out of bed and stepped toward my door, thinking I might try to look. That's when the sound suddenly shifted closer. The steps entered the hallway. They passed my door. Then they stopped. I waited, barely breathing. After a few seconds, I cracked my door open just enough to see out. A tall man stood in the hallway. Extremely tall. Long hair, thick beard. He wasn't moving, just staring at Ethan's bedroom door. I backed away, leaving my door slightly open so it wouldn't make a sound. My heart was pounding. I had no idea what to do. Then my door was pushed open. He stood in the doorway, staring straight at me. Wide eyes, completely expressionless. I screamed. He didn't react. Suddenly, Ethan and Lucas ran out of their rooms. Everything happened at once. The man shoved Lucas into the wall and knocked him to the floor like it took no effort at all. Ethan froze. Then the man turned and ran out of the cabin, disappearing into the woods. We locked every door, grabbed whatever we could use as weapons, and called the police. It took a long time for them to arrive. The man never came back. We never found out who he was or why he was there. Maybe he was looking for the owner. Maybe something else entirely. All I know is that we were lucky, because that night could have ended very differently. The drive was supposed to be long, but manageable. Just under 11 hours if everything went smoothly. In previous years, it never felt that bad. So we assumed this trip would be the same. We stuffed the trunk with bags and suitcases, started the drive on Christmas Eve, and planned to arrive late at night so we could still spend the entire next day with her family. The first stretch of the road was quiet. Traffic was lighter than usual, probably because most people had already finished traveling for the holidays. A few hours in, I pulled off at a small gas station to refuel and stretch my legs for a minute. There wasn't a single other car in sight. My girlfriend, Sarah, stayed in the car with the heat running while I headed inside to pay and grab a couple of drinks. The wind cut straight through my jacket, and the parking lot hadn't been plowed at all. I had to push through thick snow just to reach the entrance. The moment I stepped inside, something felt off. It was too quiet. The lights were on, the doors unlocked, but I didn't see anyone. I waited, assuming the clerk was in the back. I grabbed 2 drinks and stood at the counter. No one came. I called out, even leaned toward the back room to check, but there was no response. No footsteps, no voices. The place felt abandoned, even though everything suggested it shouldn't have been. After a minute or two, I put the drinks back and decided to leave. Maybe I could at least use the pump outside. As soon as I stepped back into the cold, I froze. There was a man standing right next to Sarah's window. He was knocking lightly on the glass, leaning in like he was trying to talk to her. He wore a heavy winter coat, hood up, face mostly hidden. I couldn't make out any clear features. I hurried toward the car, but the second he noticed me, he stepped back and quickly walked away, heading down toward the road without saying a word. That's when I knew he wasn't the missing gas station worker. I got into the car and asked Sarah what had just happened. She looked shaken. She told me the man had appeared out of nowhere almost immediately after I went inside. He kept knocking on the window, telling her to roll it down. Nothing else. No explanation. She didn't respond. She kept everything locked. We didn't stay. I started the car and pulled out of the station without looking back. The entire place had a wrong feeling to it, and neither of us wanted to be there any longer. Because we left so suddenly, we ended up having to reroute to another gas station farther out. The original route would have risked running out of fuel in the middle of nowhere, in freezing temperatures. Between the detour and the snow slowing us down, it was clear we were falling far behind schedule. By the time it was fully dark, we were still hours away. Both of us were exhausted, and we decided to stop at a cheap roadside motel for a few hours and continue early in the morning. Sarah called her family to let them know, and I found a small motel just off the highway. The neon 24/7 sign was lit, but the parking lot was empty. Christmas Eve wasn't exactly a popular night for travelers. I walked up to the office and felt relieved when I saw a clerk inside. I paid for a small room and went back out to grab our bags. We were beyond tired and fell asleep not long after getting inside. I set an alarm so we could leave early and still make it by morning. I slept deeply, without waking once. When the alarm went off, I dragged myself out of bed and let Sarah sleep a bit longer while I packed. Outside, the parking lot looked untouched, like no one had arrived or left overnight. The cold was brutal, and the wind kicked snow across the ground, making visibility poor. I loaded the car, went back inside, and told Sarah it was time to go. Then I headed to the front office to check out. The clerk wasn't there. I stood still, immediately reminded of the gas station. I knew I'd seen the worker earlier, so this made no sense. I stepped closer to the desk and called out. Nothing. Behind the counter, papers were scattered across the floor, like someone had left in a hurry. A wave of dread hit me. I backed away and ran back to our room, telling Sarah we needed to leave immediately. We didn't argue. We got in the car and pulled out fast. My hands were shaking as I drove through the snow-covered lot. As we passed the side of the building, I caught a glimpse of someone standing there. Same heavy winter coat. Same build. It was the man from the gas station. I didn't slow down. I got back onto the highway, and Sarah called the police. We met officers at a gas station farther down the road. That's when everything became even more disturbing. One of the officers pointed out how unlikely it was that someone could have followed us without us noticing. They checked the car and found a tracking device attached underneath near the rear wheel. It had been planted when the man approached our car earlier. Officers were sent back to both the gas station and the motel. When they reported back, both workers were confirmed missing. The only evidence was a blurry security image from the gas station camera. That Christmas morning was nothing like we had imagined. We spent the entire holiday shaken, waiting for updates that never came. As far as we know, neither worker was ever found. And I still think about how easily Sarah and I could have disappeared too, if we'd ignored our instincts for even a few more minutes. I was living alone at the time, in a small but comfortable house in a quiet, well-kept neighborhood. Spending Christmas by myself wasn't ideal, but I had learned how to make the most of it. I usually filled the day with movies, coffee, and slow walks around the area if the weather allowed. That Christmas started off peaceful. I woke up to soft snow drifting down outside, the kind that barely made a sound. Nothing intense yet. I made myself a mug of coffee, put a familiar Christmas movie on for background noise, and ate breakfast on the couch. It felt calm, almost cozy in a way I hadn't expected. By midday, the snowfall started to thicken, but it still didn't seem serious. I figured I'd take a short walk before the weather got worse. The neighborhood looked like something out of a postcard. Lights glowing in windows, decorations on doors, and not a single car moving. Everything felt frozen in place, quiet and empty. I only passed one person the entire time, a man shoveling snow a couple of streets away. Other than that, it was completely still. When I got back home, the wind had started picking up, pushing loose snow across the road in spirals. It was obvious the storm was building, just like the forecast said. I didn't mind. I had food, blankets, and no reason to leave again. The storm intensified fast. By early evening, visibility dropped dramatically. In less than an hour, the snow turned into a full whiteout. The wind rattled the windows, not violently, but enough to remind me that going outside again wasn't a good idea. With the storm roaring outside, the inside of the house felt unnaturally quiet. I made dinner and kept watching movies, turning the volume up as the wind grew louder. By nightfall, the storm was so strong it nearly drowned out the TV. That's when I heard something hit the house. At first, I brushed it off. Branches, decorations, debris blown around by the wind. It wasn't until later that I heard something unmistakable. A knock. Just one. Sharp and deliberate. I froze on the couch. Nobody ever came to my door on Christmas, and there was no reason for anyone to be out in that weather. I muted the TV and listened. For a moment, there was nothing but wind. Then came 3 more knocks. Slow. Intentional. I stood up and moved toward the front door, careful to stay out of view of the narrow side window. I didn't speak. I didn't touch the blinds. The door didn't have a peephole, which meant if I looked out, whoever was there would see me too. I waited, heart pounding. The knocking stopped. The storm swallowed the sound again. I told myself it was nothing, someone confused, maybe even a neighbor. Still, there was no chance I was opening the door. I went back to the couch, trying to calm down. A few minutes later, I heard something else. It was faint, but unmistakable. Something being dragged through the snow, slowly. The sound moved along the outside of the house, traveling from the front toward the back. I followed it mentally, step by step, until it stopped near the back door. That door had no curtain. Then came 3 knocks again, this time from the back. My stomach dropped. I stood and cautiously leaned just enough to see the door. I instantly locked eyes with someone staring in. It was too dark to make out his face clearly, but his eyes were unmistakable. Focused, watching. I pulled back out of sight immediately. That was enough. I grabbed my phone and called the police. I stayed where I was, frozen, listening to the operator while the storm howled outside. Something about the way that man looked at me sent pure fear through my body. A few minutes passed, then I heard scraping. Before I could process it, there was a violent crash against the back door. Glass shattered. The door slammed inward, pieces hitting the floor. Cold air and wind rushed into the house instantly, drowning out every other sound. I assumed he was inside, but I couldn't hear footsteps. I didn't move. I crouched behind the couch, shaking, barely breathing. The silence, broken only by the wind, was unbearable. Every second stretched painfully long. I imagined him searching the house, maybe looking for me, maybe just waiting. Then finally, I heard something else. Knocking, this time from the front door. A voice called out through the storm. A police officer. I ran to the door and let them in. The man was gone. Wet footprints trailed through parts of the house, leading toward the backyard. Outside, they vanished into the snow-covered field behind my home, erased by the blizzard almost instantly. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the edge of my bed with every light on, listening to the wind slam against what remained of the back door. When the storm finally eased, the silence that followed felt even worse. At daylight, the police returned. They searched again but found nothing new. Before leaving, one officer told me something that still sticks with me. During storms like that, people sometimes look for occupied houses, knowing the weather will erase any evidence. I told him about the knocking, about how the man moved around the house. He nodded and said some people knock to see who answers, to find out who's alone. By not answering the first time, then accidentally revealing myself at the back door, I'd given him the answer. I still think about how small choices that night led to everything that happened, and how lucky I was that the man decided to leave. Because if he hadn't, I don't know how that night would have ended.